Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time it is, I hope that you are having a good time. This is the fourth flip for a critical thinking class. This is the third one that I will assign as homework. In this flip, the first thing we're going to do is review some of the general concepts. After we're done reviewing these general concepts, we're going to move on and learn some further general concepts. Specifically, we are going to learn about how to make a clear argument. So let's go ahead and get started. So, in the last lecture, I explained to you that something is logical if the meaning of each part is clear, the parts are connected, the order of the parts easily leads to the conclusion, and the role of each premise supports the conclusion. I also explained that a statement is something that is either true or false. I divided statements into two categories. I divided them into your conclusion, which is the thing you're trying to prove, and the premise, which are the statements that support the conclusion. They provide proof and evidence that this would be true. So, I explained that the first step in dealing with an argument, especially when evaluating an argument, is to ask yourself what they're trying to convince the reader of. This is going to be their conclusion. The other statements will be premises. Figure out which ones are which using the help of indicator words. So indicator words for the conclusion could be words like therefore, thus, so, ergo, or then. Premises can be indicated by things like because, since, if, and given that. And I want to say that there are two good ways to organize an argument, and I explained this in detail on the last video, but you want to make it very easy for your reader or listener to find the conclusion of your argument. And the way that we do that is either by putting it at the top or by putting it at the bottom. So either conclusion, premise, premise, flying squirrels are the best because they are the cutest and they live in Hokkaido, or premise, premise, conclusion. If you want to do well, you should study. You want to do well, so you should study. Again, there can be any number of premises. It doesn't matter what number it is. It could be 1, it could be 100. The point is that the conclusion should either be at the very beginning or at the very end. If you do this, it will make it much easier for people to understand what it is that you are arguing. All right, so now we want to make sense of clarity. We want to talk about the things that make an argument clear. So I'm going to suggest 3 C words related to clarity, and then I'm also going to suggest a fourth concept, and this fourth concept is revised from the previous versions to make it easier to understand. I want to suggest 3 pairs. The C words each have an opposite. So concise is the opposite of verbose, consistent is the opposite of inconsistent, and concrete is the opposite of abstract. So when we make an argument, as much as we can, we want to be concise, consistent, and concrete. So in order to make these clear arguments, again, concise, concrete, consistent, and we want to use reasonable justifications, not emotions or force. So consistent. Consistent means every time you say something, you use the same word for the same meaning. This is extremely important in critical thinking. So some English language learners and some native speakers learn that it's a good idea to demonstrate that you can vary the words that you are using. This is true in general, but this is not true in the core of your argument. So words that are not important to your argument, you can change those up. Words that are key terms in your argument, keep using the same term for the same meaning. So for instance, do not construct your argument this way. If you want to be a teacher, then you should go to HUEA. One who wants to be an educator, thus you should go to Kyodai. So all of these things are confusing because HUEA and Kyokudai are the same thing. Educator and teacher are the same thing. So instead, we're going to want to use every term consistently, as I do here on the right-hand side. If you want to be a teacher, then you should go to HUEA. You want to be a teacher, therefore you should go to HUEA. Second example, Janice does not believe that she has cancer. Miss Smith thinks that the allergy medicine she takes is curing her tumors. Sally's aunt is really dying, but she does not understand that the cancer cells are spreading. The metastasized cancer will probably prove mortal. So again, we have lots of things. Dying has the same meaning as mortal. Janice, Miss Smith, and Sally's aunt are all the same person. Spreading and metastasized are the same thing. So all of these are terms where we are just making too many terms. So Janice does not believe that she has cancer. Janice thinks allergy medicine is curing her cancer. Janice is dying. So again, when these are key terms in your argument, use the same term. We call this being consistent. Next, be concise. For all intents and purposes, the reason Mr. Henderson arrived late for work was due to the fact that he stopped at very many traffic lights that were red in color. This is much too complex for what it's saying. Instead, Mr. Henderson was late because he had to stop at many red lights. Smoking tobacco can cause humans to suffer unnecessary consequences. This is not necessary in your wording. Instead, just say smoking causes lung damage. The existence of computers and computer technology has greatly influenced commercial enterprise and information exchange. This, again, we don't need to say this way. Computers have helped business and communication, says everything we needed to. So, concise means saying only what it is that you need to make your argument. Mrs. Adams, 5 foot 4 inches tall, age 40, is a computer programming expert who works at Microsoft and an expert in Shoto, and she says Heather's handwriting is very good. Heather is always praised by her Shoto teacher, therefore Heather is good at Shoto. We don't need a lot of these details. We can simplify this. Mrs. Adams, an expert in Shoto, says Heather's handwriting is very good. Heather is always praised by her Shoto teacher, therefore Heather is good at Shoto. So we didn't need any of the details about her working at Microsoft. We didn't need to know that she was a computer programmer. Why? Because these did not contribute to the conclusion that we were trying to make. So we should cut all of this information. Now, there's something important here, and this matters greatly, and it's easy to see in the Japanese words for this, a little harder in the English ones, but concise does not have the same meaning as simple. If something is concise, it keeps only the information that relates to the conclusion. If something is simple, it removes information regardless of whether it relates to the conclusion. So, we have an example here. Concise, removing information unnecessary to the conclusion. Simple, removing information regardless of whether it relates to the conclusion. If the car went over 300 miles per hour, it set a land speed record. The red car with no trunk went 350 miles an hour, so it set a land speed record. In the concise version, we're going to say if the car went over 300 miles an hour, it set a land speed record. The car went 350 miles an hour, so it set a land speed record. The simple version, we're going to remove things that we need. So we're just going to say something like the car went fast. So the key here is that concise does make things easier, but it does not remove information that we need. Simple removes information. Next concept, abstract versus concrete. So we can view this as a spectrum. If something that's very abstract is bad, something that's very concrete is good. Concrete things are easy to understand, abstract things are not. Abstract, do something, make money. Make money by selling food, make money by selling Chinese food, make money by selling Chinese food for 300 yen, make money by selling fried rice for 300 yen, make money by selling chicken fried rice for 300 yen at Rokuryosai, which is the school festival here. The more concrete you get, the better it is. So abstract and concrete are opposites, so she is a bad student. This is abstract. Why is she a bad student? What is it that makes her a bad student? She is lazy and not considerate. Okay, how is she lazy? How is she not considerate? These are very general statements. She does not do her homework and she leaves trash on her desk after class. Okay, this is very concrete. We would know what it is that she's doing. We would know why you think that she's lazy. Lazy here meaning she doesn't do homework. And not considerate meaning she leaves trash on her desk. Concrete language expresses facts that we can observe. So let's look at this with a few more and let's ask ourselves, do not do bad things. Do not eat ice cream on Tuesday. Do well in life. You should marry Jane. I like all foods. So do not do bad things in life, or do not do bad things is abstract. What are the bad things? What things are we saying are bad? Depending on who we are asking, this may include things that other people do not think are bad. Do not eat ice cream on Tuesday. Concrete. Very specific. Do well in life. Abstract. How? How does one do well in life? What are the steps one should take? You should marry. When? Who? You should marry Jane. This is concrete. It is a specific person and probably a specific occasion. I like all foods. Abstract. Define food more carefully. Give us some information we can work from. So, sometimes people think that being concrete is the opposite of being concise. Because when you're being concrete, you add details, and when you're being concise, you remove some details. This is not true. So let me give you some examples. So abstract is very abstract and very concise to say do something. It is concise but concrete to say onigiri for 150 yen on December 1st. It's verbose but abstract, do things by using means to effect ends. Basically saying use tools to do things. It's verbose but concrete, make money by selling chicken fried rice for 300 yen at Roku Ryosai in the third stall on the left. So if this information is not necessary to our argument, we would not want to include it. The same thing with the one on the left, we only want to include the details we need to make our argument. Another one, looking at consistent and concise together, and then verbose and inconsistent. So top left, if you like rice, you will love hamazushi. You like rice, you love hamazushi. Consistent and verbose, do things by using means to effect ends. Inconsistent, if you like Japanese rice, you will love kaiten sushi. You prefer short grain rice, therefore you will like hamazushi. Most Japanese rice is considered short grain rice. Hamazushi is the name of one kaiten sushi. So here we are changing terms. Verbose and inconsistent. If you like various types of grain that include Japanese rice, wheat, and barley, you will love kaiten sushi and other businesses like counter sushi. You prefer short grain rice to many other grains, therefore you will like hamazushi and choice and hamamaru. Okay, so this is a very verbose way of making that sort of claim, and you're doing things inconsistently. We are changing terms. Again, we want to remember the point of all this is we're trying to convince people, and this matters for another way that we can be careful in how we make our arguments. To convince is to bring someone to believe or to act like your conclusion is true. There's at least 4 ways that we can do this. The first one is I can trick you. I can tell you things that are false and convince you to believe something. The second is I can appeal to emotion. I can start crying, I can start yelling, I can do different things to make you agree with me. The third is I can threaten to punch you. I can say I'm going to hurt you if you don't do what I tell you. The fourth is to appeal to reason. In critical thinking, the main thing we want to do is to appeal to reason. So we want to think about how we can avoid using the other methods here. So force is pretty easy to avoid. If I'm not hitting you, I'm not doing it. Tricking is, in a sense, easy to avoid. As long as I'm not lying, I'm not trying to trick you. As long as I am trying to provide you with information so you can make a decision. Appealing to emotions is interesting because there are ways that we sometimes do this very obviously and sometimes do this very non-obviously. So, if we're using emotions, there's a lot of emotions we can use to appeal to people. We can appeal with anger. It's Bob's fault that you don't have all the things you want. Example, foreigners are taking your jobs. Fear. If you don't want to do this, then you'll probably suffer a lot. If we change our retirement system, Grandma Misako will die. Happiness. Buying this product will make you happy. So why does every food ad have people smiling? The idea is that if you eat our food, you will be happy, you'll be enjoying your life. Pity. So in America, for instance, there are ads that show pictures of dogs that are suffering and say, please give money to our charity. Or you can show people suffering in many places in the world saying, please give money to our charity. Whether the money you give will go to those people, different people, or no hurting people at all, I don't know. But the point is that these are ways to appeal to emotion. Most attempts to convince people with emotion are not arguments. Appeals to emotion and argument are often words that have emotional connotations or nuances. So a connotation or nuance is a part of a word's meaning that is not in the dictionary. So it's something where if you just looked up the word, you may not get the impression of how people actually use this word. Another term for the same idea is loaded language. This is because it is loaded with meaning in the same way that a gun is loaded. So most people have positive feelings about words like mother, family, and beautiful, but negative feelings about words like terrible, thief, and ugly. To avoid an appeal to emotion, it's best to remove words from arguments that are loaded. These words tend to prejudice readers by making the argument without using reason. As an example, if someone is a freedom fighter, we should support them. Alex is a freedom fighter, consequently, we should support Alex. So the word freedom fighter is a positive word, and a negative word could be like terrorist or rebel. A neutral word would be fighter, or just a neutral description, fighting the government. To avoid appealing to emotion, we should remove these sort of loaded words. This tends to prejudice readers by making the argument without reason. So we should not have any addictions. Breathing is an addiction. We should stop breathing. So obviously this is a bad argument. It depends on the word addiction to make its argument. Addiction or dependency, usually a negative term. But then if we move to necessity is rather a neutral term, and joy is a somewhat positive term. So if we switch the language, the feeling we have about this would change. So we should not have any joy. Breathing is a joy. We should stop breathing. That argument is going to sound much weaker. So in this week's flip, we talked about several things that make an argument good or bad. We talked about being concise, clear, and consistent. We also talked about trying to convince using reason. So we are trying to convince our listener of what we want to say using our reason rather than emotions or force or trickery. So thank you for your attention today. I'm really glad that you're watching these flips. Please remember to ask questions in class. That's a major part of your grade. I think that these ideas are really important, and I hope that you are gaining from them. So today we looked at ways to make your argument clearer, and these ways apply to all types of arguments. Thank you for your time and attention. I look forward to seeing you in class.